I will be reading an ancient word from Luke 6:27 through 38. But I say to you who are listening, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Give to everyone who asks of you, and if anyone takes away what is yours, do not ask for it back again. Do to others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? I guess we need to hear that twice. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive payment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to receive as much again. Instead, love your enemies, do good, and lend, expecting nothing in return. Your reward will be great, and you will be children of the Most High. For he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Do not judge, and you will not be judged. Do not condemn, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap, for the measure you give will be the measure you get back. I will continue with a contemporary word, The Hardest Blessing by Jan Richardson. If we cannot lay aside the wound, then let us say it will not always bind us. Let us say what damage will not internally determine, the damage will not internally determine our path. Let us say the line of our life will not always travel along the places we are torn. Let us say that forgiveness can take some practice, can take some patience, can take a long and rugged time. Let us say that to offer the hardest blessing, we will need the deepest grace, that to forgive the sharpest pain, we will need the fiercest love, that to release the ancient ache, we will need new strength for every day. Let us say the womb will not be our final home, that through it runs a road, a way we would not have chosen, but which we will finally see forgiveness, so long practice coming towards us, shining with a joy so well deserved. And that ends the reading for today. Thank you.
Well, today's invitation to transformation is one we've been trying to hear probably our whole lives. And I would have to say it's not a gentle invitation of would you like to. If you read the scriptures, it says do this. This is an instruction, it's a commandment. We don't tend to like those sorts of things. We like to think we decide for ourselves. So maybe we do try to decide for ourselves to accept this invitation unrealistic as it may be. One of the commentators I read this week said, Christians are the best argument against loving one's enemies. And I think what they meant is we can't always be counted on. I mean, this is a very costly commandment were we to actually carry out this idea of loving our enemies. This human condition in which we live and which shapes our lives, this human condition is full of things that we would rather not remember and certainly would rather not forgive. This is one of the hardest teachings, to love your enemies. It's hard to understand and it's hard to do. If you're thinking about now, where on earth did Jesus say these things? Did Jesus really say these things? Well, this same message in a slightly different formulation shows up in both the Gospel of Matthew and the Gospel of Luke. And scholars unanimously say Jesus probably said that. I mean, if it's a hard saying, Jesus probably said it, right? That's what the message is there. It's a simple message, and it's not easy. I've been listening to a politician, James Tallarico from Texas, who keeps reminding us that his grandfather taught him, his grandfather, the Baptist preacher, taught him, love God and love your neighbor. It's simple, but not easy. And loving your enemy, well, it turns out that your enemy is your neighbor too. Yeah. Some people say that a church is a community of enemies learning to love one another. And thinking about this passage and anticipating speaking about it today, gave it an ambitious title, The Freedom to Forgive. I came all the way to the end of Jesus' message, and I have to say, I'm not sure we're going to get up to forgiveness today. I mean, there's a lot that comes before forgiveness. And I think sometimes we might say that while something is going on, some kind of abuse or destruction is going on, it's not quite the time to forgive. But it's still the time to love our enemies. In his foundational book, Jesus and the Disinherited, Howard Thurman draws on his experience as an African-American man and in the African-American community to say, what does this message, what do the messages of Jesus have to say to those who have their backs against the wall? That's the phrase he keeps using over and over again, their backs against the wall. And ultimately he says, we have this love ethic. It kind of provides the checkpoint for all the things that we say. He uses this phrase that I hadn't quite noticed the first few times I read his book. He talks about ultimate integrity in the ethical enterprise. And I think recognizing that this work of becoming the ethical beings we are called to be is an ongoing enterprise. For Howard Thurman, when he talks about loving our neighbor, he's speaking in a very direct way. He says the neighbor it's a non-spatial concept. So for most of us, when we hear the word neighbor, we think about the people who live next door, and they indeed are neighbors. But this concept of neighbor and of loving your neighbor and loving your enemy isn't limited by physical proximity. He notes that most often we find ourselves needing to practice loving our enemy within our own communities, that is where we encounter the most intimate conflict. It's where we encounter the disagreements that rattle us on a daily basis. But Jesus gives several examples of loving enemies who are not in that immediate intimate community. When, for example, we have the story of the Good Samaritan, where someone from another community entirely helps someone from Israel. Or the story of the Syro-Phoenician woman, another culture entirely, in an adjacent nation, where Jesus encounters his inclination to religious exclusiveness and realizes that, no, what I thought were enemies are my neighbors. And then, of course, Thurman reminds us about the Romans. These are the political entity that dominated the people of Israel and most of the region, and taxed them heavily and abused them in multiple ways. So when it's our personal enemy in our family, our neighborhood, our church community, this is a situation where we really need to strive for reconciliation. Not easy. And admittedly, Thurman talks about there are people within the nation of Israel who make it very difficult, and he's speaking here of the tax collectors, and certainly some of the religious leaders who collaborate with Rome to maintain a Roman kind of peace in the region. These are people we might feel betrayed by. And he reminds us that loving these neighbors isn't the same as condoning what they do. But still, we see in the Gospels that Jesus says to a tax collector, "Follow me," and the tax collector does. None of us are Jesus yet, maybe ever, but it reminds us that we too are called not to treat people as enemy, but to love them, and to do what we can to call them to this practice of loving the neighbor. It gets yet more complicated, of course, when he talks about Rome, because this is both religious and political oppression. But what it takes is to put yourself in a situation where that Roman person is in proximity to you in such a way that you can recognize each other as human beings. Again, not easy. It's this practice of loving one's enemy This is a fundamental attack. Maybe the word attack isn't the best because it sounds violent in some way, but it's a fundamental approach to the idea of the enemy. we have to think about, how do we have the normal experience of fellowship? That's what Thurman says, a normal experience of fellowship. A common sharing of a sense of mutual worth and value. It requires us to be able to perceive ourselves as status-free. We no longer have the status of the one who is disinherited, who has their back against the wall, the one who has an enemy. Or who is an enemy. We have to let go of that status, he says. Because it's when two freed spirits meet. This is when you have the mutual discovery, an attitude of mutual respect. Thurman's example in this score was the story of Jesus and the Roman centurion who comes asking that Jesus heal his servant. Because we know that, in general, a Roman would not ask for help from an Israelite. This is a case where both people, the Roman and Jesus, have been able to let go of this sense of enemy, this sense of distance, and be human together. So Thurman reminds us that this loving our enemy, it's not just a sentimental feeling kind of thing. That loving one's enemy has its roots in concrete experience. It's a kind of inner authority. I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about this balm of Gilead, that we too have experienced this healing in ourselves that allows us to set aside our own status and the status of the other. If you've studied Thurman at all, you know that Thurman was a mystical Christian. He himself, while he was the teacher of and the inspirer of many activists, civil rights activists, he went to college with Martin Luther King Sr., and he knew that family. They knew him. He was part of that whole African American community of people seeking liberation. But he himself, he was a mystic, he was a minister, he was a theologian. He wasn't out on the streets. But it is said that Martin Luther King Jr. carried this book around, Jesus and the Dispossessed. So it reminds us that we also have the capacity and the opportunity to discern our own understanding of ourselves in our spiritual tradition and how we bring this spiritual tradition into our own souls, Thurman might say, and into the world. I actually wrote down an actual quote from Thurman here because I liked the way he phrased this. He said, "We have to put ourselves at the disposal of the Spirit," and Spirit has a capital S. We have to put at the disposal of the Spirit the needful dedication and discipline so that we can live effectively in the chaos of the present, in the high destiny of a son of God. And if he were in the 21st century, he would probably say son, daughter, child. One of his commentators notes, it's not hard, but we do need to grant Thurman the recognition that he was using the very masculine language of his time. So we've got this question of who are our enemies. Just quickly, because we're trying to talk in practical terms here. The Gospel of Luke told us that there are people who hate you, curse you, abuse you, strike you, rob you, demand things from you, and steal from you. It's interesting to try to make enemies a concrete something, because we're inclined to be kind of romantic and say that loving our enemies is a feeling that we cultivate. But the Gospel and Thurman would say it's not just a feeling. It's not just a feeling. In fact, the feeling may not be what comes first. What comes first is the action. So you do good to your enemies. You bless them. You pray for them. You offer the other cheek. That could take a whole sermon in itself to unpack that idea. Give to them. Let them take from you. And don't ask for restitution. But interesting in the gospel, Jesus isn't asking us to forgive these people right now. When these things are going on, as I said, it's not maybe yet the time for forgiveness. But it is the time to know that forgiveness will come. That's one of the fruits of the dedication and discipline. So you may be here today at a defining moment in your life. Maybe you're surrounded by hatred or hurt or hostility or humiliation. Maybe you've tried to bury it, and maybe it hasn't worked. And maybe it's still tying you in knots. And this is a time when we get to ponder. Am I going to turn into the person who hates me? Am I going to become someone who hates? Thurman called hate one of the hounds of hell that dogs people with their back against the wall. He talked about fear and hate and deception, these distortions of the spirit. And in this sense, Thurman takes quite a psychological turn, because he says our own, he didn't use the word mental health, we might today, but our own spiritual health depends on us recognizing when these hounds of hell enter us, try to take up residence. And that's when we need to practice all the things that Jesus has taught. I'm not a saint. Maybe you aren't yet either. But we don't walk alone in this. We have each other. And each of us has many other people. And I think this recognition that this is the human condition, that we are not alone with these challenges. We are not alone facing these hounds of hell. We're not alone because there are other humans with us. And we're not alone because whatever this spirit is, however you define or understand this spirit that enters our hearts, enters our souls, enters our minds, that brings peace, whatever this is, This Spirit is with us as well. I have a short poem here from Steve Garnaas Holmes to end us. He calls it, not surprisingly, love your enemies. And he says, this is not an impossible command. It's your secret power. This is what love is, for the other, not for what you want or fear or resent. Love is not a payment for services rendered. Love is how you stay connected with the world. Love is the only connection. This is power that can't be taken away from you. This is your salvation, your joy. Only when you are free to love like that are you truly free. Love is how you stay connected with the world. Love is the only connection. May it be so. Amen.